Just when your practice has successfully modernized, now everything has to be virtualized. How could a practice support a shift to remote working and at the same time ensure customers and clients are cared for and have positive experiences? In this episode of the podcast, you'll find out how to get tomorrow started today and ways a company could change its approach, its attitudes, and the way it thinks about how to use technology to maintain a shared mission remotely. Welcome to the Go Beyond Disruption podcast, where you'll get weekly insights on the technologies and the mindsets that power new opportunities within the global accounting and finance profession. From the UK hub of AICPA and CIMA, I am Kyle Hannon. This week, I'm joined by a returning expert guest, Steve Menges. He's the product team member for assurance at CPAcom, and he also leads on a program here called Modernizing Your Practice, and he makes their podcast of the same name, so I kind of feel I'm talking to someone who's likely to be doing this a lot better than I will, but, time will tell. And we will be spending some very worthwhile time together talking about this topic, which really has the potential to transform almost any practice. And this is the first of two conversations that we'll be having about the topic, and that topic is becoming a virtualized CPA practice, how to get tomorrow started today. Stephen and I will be talking about steps that firms can take today to holistically digitize their services in a way that drives efficient, high-quality work and brings even more value to clients today and tomorrow. Frankly, I don't even understand what the phrase holistically digitise actually means, but fortunately, Stephen, I'm sure, will tell us. He'll also outline how a team can work remotely and become a more effective but virtual firm. Talking of virtual work, Stephen, welcome again. Where are you joining us from today?
Hi, Kyle. I am joining you from Napa, California, the heart of wine country out here on the West Coast.
Well, I appreciate the time you've taken to step in out of that glorious sunshine. It is a bit different over here in the west of England, where our summer's taken a very grey and wet turn. But as always, the forecast says that's all going to change for the better very soon, so my fingers are crossed. Change is what we're talking about here today, and I've been looking at the ways that things are changing all around us. That's something we do on the podcast pretty much every week. But this year it's been different because of the pandemic. And because of the way that people are changing their working practices. And of course, technology is changing faster than ever to support those changes. So I think before we start looking at what is changing, let's find out about what's been keeping you busy. Stephen, you've been a guest on this show before, so let's have a quick catch up. What are you working on at the moment? How does it connect with the accounting and finance profession right now?
Okay. Well, I've been doing a lot of research over the past year, and much of it has been around how organizations are approaching their future, including the key areas of innovation, risk management, technological change, often all at the same time. It's kind of a fascinating dynamic to dig into, especially for industries with long periods of relatively little change, like accounting and finance, not industries known for rapid change. So, I like thinking about the next 2 to 5 years on these topics, about these different areas of change and how organizations are looking at it. But, I'm really more interested in what are the steps that firms can take today to really holistically digitize their services and interactions to drive efficient, high quality work and bring even more value for clients, to virtualize their business model. And at the same time, find a way to bring more value to clients. So with what's happened in the past few months, I'm now interested in how firms can use what we're learning about remote working during this kind of forced move to remote learning. How can they use that to become a more innovative and virtual firm, but still maintain that shared mission across their firm? There is sort of a downside to becoming more digital and virtual, and that's part of that. So I'm really passionate about how we can all learn how to change our thinking and simplify things to make it all happen starting now. So these are really the kind of things that I've been thinking about and kind of the connection to the accounting and finance profession.
And of course, for those listeners who've been with this podcast for more than a couple of episodes, they will have heard you on some of our previous episodes on modernizing your practice. And that, of course, is something that brings your work at CPA.com into those conversations. So for those people who may not have heard those episodes, people who won't know much about CPA.com, fill us in. What is CPA.com?
The short answer is CPA.com is the technology arm of the AICPA. So we're kind of cousins, Kyle. And what does CPA.com do? Like what's their mission? It's about advancing technology, research, and innovation for the accounting profession. It's about leading the technology ecosystem for the accounting and finance profession. And it's about transforming practice areas, and overall it's about empowering the profession for the digital age. So if you kind of think about what the AICPA does, the association, where there needs to be technological development, that's CPA.com. That's why it was created. And we're connected to the association, but we're kind of like their tech startup, let's say.
Yeah, that's interesting. Just like you, I've come into the world of accounting and finance from a very different field. So where did you begin your journey to CPA.com?
Well, I started in management consulting straight out of graduate school, right? So I was one of those MBAs out there doing business process reengineering, studying processes and coming up with process and technology solutions to make companies more efficient. That's really where I started, and then I kind of moved into becoming a project manager. I started managing those types of projects, and then I got into managing technology implementation projects, software and hardware and different solutions like that. So that's really where I got my start, and then I eventually moved into product management in the technology space and then product marketing. So I've kind of had a range of different roles there, but they're all kind of related. It's all really about understanding a business and who their target customers are and their existing customers are, understanding the unmet needs that they have, and then coming up with, hey, how do we solve that problem? And then once we figure that out, how do we market that? How do we get that message out there to help clients solve the problems that they have?
Totally get that. I can definitely understand why people would want to help people. But what originally sparked your interest in wanting to do that?
Well, I would say college loans was part of it. It was a pretty lucrative area to get into. But I enjoy problem solving, and I like addressing kind of uncomfortable, sticky problems that are not easy to solve. And there's a lot of that in management consulting, and there's a lot of that in software and hardware. It's about getting into that. And the Modernizing Your Practice series and podcast that I run, we dig into these risk liability issues, these like legal issues, kind of these uncomfortable, complex issues that firm leaders want to get help with, so that's what we really explore in there. These are problems that they're not easy to solve, but they need to be solved, and they deserve having some people thinking about it and working on it, and that I like a good challenge, and that's really what drove me to it.
Have you always worked in that field, or did you step aside and do something totally different?
I've done a couple things different. One of them is I am an adjunct professor at New York University in Greenwich Village, New York. I teach in 2 different business graduate school programs there, and I've been doing that for about 10 years. So I really enjoy that. I teach Capstone the Business Plan in one master's degree program, and then I teach some marketing courses in a technology business program, and then another one in more of a marketing focused business program. I also have kind of in the middle of my day job, my other career, I did work at an advertising agency for a couple years just to kind of recharge my creative batteries when I first was doing a lot of content creation and marketing. I had the opportunity to go and work at a creative ad agency and do some really interesting stuff, really kind of fun, innovative stuff there. And that was fun.
That's definitely a world I know something about. Working in creative in the past as well, I know there's often a very big sales component to that. Did you have much to do with that side of the business?
I did. When you're in product marketing, which is a hat that I've worn a number of times, you're really in charge of supporting the sales team. You're out there, you're educating your target audience on both the problems that we solve and helping them get educated on those and start leading them to the approaches to solve the problems. But you're also typically in charge of training sales, giving sales the tools they need to be able to have those conversations with potential customers and with existing customers about how they can make their organizations better and solve their problems. So, I've been involved in sales enablement. I also actually did a year as a sales manager. I was asked by the head of sales of a Fortune 500 software company that I worked for if I would run a sales team for a year. And unfortunately, sometimes my reflex is to just say yes. So I didn't know what I was getting myself into, but it was really a fun and challenging year running a sales team. I have an incredibly high appreciation for people that do sales. Now, after doing that, we had a good year, but I have to say I was exhausted when it was over. But it made me much better at my other jobs, at being in product management and product marketing.
Excellent. So you told us you enjoyed writing, you enjoyed teaching, you like helping people find problems that they're finding hard to solve and then helping them solve those problems. And you also get involved with white papers, industry presentations, blogs. I've mentioned podcasts, of course. And of course, this is all work within the financial industry.
Right.
You were also involved in some first generation cloud service provider setups, weren't you? So, you do have a tech hat on when you need to. How did you move from that world into the world of CPA.com?
Yeah, I was in cloud before it was called cloud. They didn't really have a name for it yet. It was, I think we called ourselves, that we were managed service providers. So it was that's how long ago it was. And it was really fascinating. I first did that for a big hardware company called Storage Tech, which is now part of Oracle. But we decided to take our model for computer data storage and backup hardware and turn that into a managed service. Turn that into essentially a first generation cloud business. And I got to be, on the ground floor there and build that into a business, which eventually got spun off. And then I did something similar with a startup that I helped start, where we built another company in that same space, where we kind of took things that were traditionally done in the data center inside of each company and said, hey, we can do this better than each company doing it on their own. So we built it into a managed service model, the kind of thing that is very common today, where you pay based on your usage of a service, you pay like subscription pricing, but back then nobody really did that. We had to sort of evangelize the model and the concepts first, but that was really great. And that was another company that got acquired. They're now part of IBM. We were actually IBM's first cloud business. After they acquired the startup that I was part of, they relabeled it IBM Smart Cloud Services. So I was part of that early on, and that's fun. Doing a startup is something I would recommend for people to try once if they get the opportunity.
Opportunity, yes, always a good thing. Well, perhaps not always. At the moment where we're recording this, you may hear that someone's taking the opportunity to do a bit of drilling not too far away. It's the nature of the beast. Life continues. We're not in a studio. What we do is record these podcasts in various places all over the world with different team members presenting or co-presenting different shows. So you will often hear that in the background, you hear the sounds of real life, which to me is always a good thing. Talking of which, let's start with the opportunities that you're seeing in this current time of disruption. What does a typical workday look like for you, Steve? Who do you engage with? And what sort of things are you and your clients working on together? I'm assuming it's not the drilling. So give us a sense of the kind of work you do and how you engage with them.
Well, where I spend my time, where I'm really obsessed right now, is I study and work with A&A firms or audit and assurance, to not just use the acronym. And I'm also really focused on the rest of that ecosystem. And when I say ecosystem, what I'm talking about is, you've got CPA firms, and then you've got CPA firm clients, right? But then you've also got the clients each have, they have very interested third parties, right? So if you think about an audit report, for example, audited financials, right? That ecosystem is the client hires a firm to audit their financials. They kind of work back and forth on that engagement. They create an audit report, and that gets delivered to the client. Well, then the actual consumers or users of that audit report, of the important data that's in there, that can include regulators, that can include banks and lenders who rely on that to make decisions. That can include the board of directors, stockholders, et cetera. So I'm focused not just on audit and assurance firms, but also the entire ecosystem which they and their clients are working and involved with. So I kind of put the hats on for all of them to try to understand their perspective and what's needed. What are they looking for? What are they trying to do? The reports, the documents that A&A firms put out there, it's like, so how is that going to be used? Thinking beyond just the engagement itself, it's what happens to it later, and throughout that whole ecosystem. It's really interesting, and when I look at A&A firms, one of the things that I'm focused on is understanding how can they reach their quality control goals, and then how can they add value for new customers and prospects. So if you talk to the leaders of big audit and insurance firms, typically they'll lead with one of those two. They'll either lead with, we're really focused on quality control here, or they'll say, hey, we're really obsessed with finding ways to add new value for our customers and prospects. But usually the second or third one will be the other. Right. So they're trying to do those two things, which would not necessarily work well together, because as you add more and more quality control, that's time and effort towards that activity. Whereas, being creative to find ways to add new value for customers and prospects, that's a different kind of activity. But that's what firms are interested in. They're interested in quality control. They're interested in adding new value. They're interested in minimizing their risk liability and other risks. So I study them and I work with them to understand how to help them do that, how to help them get better quality control within their audit practice and within the firm. Helping them understand how do they add new value? How do they find ways to add new value for their clients? That's, like I said, by studying the ecosystem, the more I understand about their clients, the more I can help a firm come up with new ways to add value. All right. So one example is I work with top 100 A&A firm and kind of asked them, I said, who are your fastest growing clients? And it ended up that most of them are cloud service organizations, which I have some history with. So I said, all right, I'd like to talk to some cloud service organizations and just talk to them about what are their issues? What are their issues that are sort of related to what the CPA firm does for them and related to their, for example, their audit reports or their service organization and cybersecurity audit reports, the kind of documents that they get from their CPA firm. And, those kind of conversations led me to, they have a real issue with getting requests for those documents from third parties. So it's like, well, if the firm can help the client manage these third-party requests better and get these reports efficiently out to all these people that need them, like that would be solving a problem for them. That's the kind of thing that is involved in my day, is really just trying to get into the head of all the people in that three-party ecosystem.
and then giving them a roadmap.
Yeah, you're right. And then creating a roadmap for them and other A&A firms to solve those problems and be more efficient and be better at what they're trying to do, to increase their quality control where they're looking to do that and find ways to add value.
I get that. So in the past, this would probably have meant things like meeting with clients and various stakeholders face to face. You'd be conducting evaluations on premise, on site. You'd be getting together with people for in-person brainstorming sessions or to talk about process improvements, all that kind of stuff. But at the moment, and we're recording this, of course, in the context of the pandemic, actually doing things on the ground isn't so easy. And we can understand that becoming a virtualized practice makes very, very good sense. But of course, this is something that you've been working on this for a long time, helping people modernize their practices. This was something that even before the pandemic, people have been looking at going remote, moving into the cloud, becoming virtualized in everything they do. They've been looking at this kind of thing for years, decades even. But it's happening now with an even greater urgency because there is no choice. Let's talk about that topic, virtualizing your CPA practice. That's what we've called the podcast, and we've subtitled it, How Do We Get Tomorrow Started Today? When we ask the question, why is this important? We understand that the disruptions that we're seeing around us right now is caused by the pandemic. But if we take the pandemic out of the equation, that still leaves us with a pretty obvious question. Why would a virtualized practice still be crucial?
Well, if you think about it, the future of audit and assurance, right, A&A, that's really been a hot topic for ages. And with the development of a truly transformational dynamic audit solution coming, it's easy to see why that's the big change for which firms are starting to plan. They've heard little bits and pieces about this, that the fact that a dynamic audit type solution is coming. All right. But really, it's more about what about today? Can firms afford to essentially stand still for the next year or two doing things the way that they've been doing it? Can they afford to stand still for the next 6 months? Is that what their competition is doing? Are they missing out on opportunities? Are they missing out on efficiencies by not investing in technology and by not virtualizing now? Because the tools are there. During this pandemic, what we're finding out is you can get on a Zoom call with your 93-year-old grandmother and have a good conversation and have video. And then, next thing you know, she's sharing her screen and you're collaborating on recipes or the planning of an event. The tools for collaboration and virtual interaction are there. They work well. And that includes not only the basic client firm communication, but also the ability to collaborate on documents and engagements, the ability to interact in a meaningful way when you're not in the same room. Of course, there are advantages to meeting face to face. It feels more comfortable. You feel a little bit closer. But I'll tell you, even with firms that really like to have that client meeting kind of in the big boardroom, they know that they don't need to have that meeting, at the beginning of every engagement, and then in a status report in the middle of the engagement, and then another one to wrap it up and essentially hand them the final report or document. It's just not necessary. It's a lot of time and expense that it isn't really necessary. It doesn't add value. You still want to do that, but everyone's time is valuable. So by virtualizing your practice, you're really doing yourself, your firm, and your clients a favor because you're doing things more efficiently. They're doing things more efficiently. You're all getting time back. And like I said, the technology is good enough out there in all the areas of what firms do that you can do that now. The pandemic just sort of helped people realize it a little bit faster than they might have otherwise done that. This trend was happening towards virtualization of firms and businesses overall, right? But it was happening kind of slowly. You had your early adopters who always do everything first. But a lot of firms were just sort of waiting, they weren't really getting on the bandwagon, and then the world changed, as did the priorities for business leaders. I subscribe to your podcast, Kyle. I subscribe to this. And what have your topics been since the middle of March?
Oh, you listen.
Yeah.
That's very good to hear. It's always nice to meet a listener. Well, for our podcast, there's been a blend of different perspectives, generally focusing on one thing, and that, of course, is disruption and how the profession can go beyond it, sometimes using technology, other times using our innate human intelligence, things like mindset changes, etc. I think the main disruption right now is obviously the pandemic. We've heard recordings from people in the profession as they've shared their firm's lockdown experiences. We've also featured several episodes on things like crisis management, risk assessments, organizational resiliency, emergency remote work, cybersecurity, which is going to be pretty important coming up with Cybersecurity Month coming up shortly in October later this year. We've talked about things from several levels too. We've included topics like how do you plan to be a virtual CFO? And of course, if things get really tough, we've also talked about how to keep yourself marketable and employable during an economic downturn, which I think we're seeing the grim reality of around us right now. So as I said, there's been a number of different perspectives, including, of course, some insights from you and your team at CPA.com as well, obviously.
Right. And, and that's, I think, what you would expect. The focus has rightly been on getting the business, getting your people, through the day, through the week, through the month, and any way that you can. That's where we've been with global events, and in 2020, change in key areas is no longer optional. It's not like we could do this way. We could go more virtual. The change is already happening, and if the change is already happening, then the question is, can firms adopt this more distributed, more virtual business model and support a shift to remote work while still ensuring customers are cared for and have a positive experience? Like, can all that happen now, and can it go on beyond this pandemic, beyond the global events? I have my opinion on that, which I think you probably know, but it's always good to hear other people. And Kim Moore, who is the director of audit at Summit CPAs, she had joined us for a LinkedIn Live session recently to share some wisdom and practical advice for auditing firms who are just trying to adjust to remote working conditions. And she mentions having a specific plan for constant communications with clients. And I think it's important there that you to make it a plan, not just to think it, but to have a specific plan for how you're going to communicate with clients under these circumstances. And she also shared 2 other keys. So why don't I let you hear from her? Here's Kim.
What I would suggest is, number one, be patient with folks, because our experience, we deal with quite a number of different clients. They're in very different industries, different setups. And so some are very tech savvy. And so you can just throw it out there. They're good to go. They love just kind of getting in and tooling around with it. Some are not.
And related to that, here's Kim again, this time on providing tools with which to work with clients.
Don't just have one tool. Have a couple of different options, because maybe one tool is just too confusing or doesn't work in their environment. So always have a backup that you can use with them.
So Kim brings up 3 really good points, and that is, to have a specific plan for constant communication for clients. They're really going to need you to communicate even more than you did before, because they're scrambling and they need you to be there if you have to be over communicating. So have a plan for it, have it scheduled. Don't let it be like, yeah, they'll let me know if they have a problem. And then talking about be patient with clients. Don't think that just because you're getting better at using these kind of virtual organization type tools that they're going to be really good at it. So they may get a little frustrated as you try to communicate or do collaboration with them. So be really patient with clients as you both adjust to how things are changing. And then the last one, I think probably it's going to sound like common sense, but I can guarantee you that it's important. And that is, if you're providing tools with which to work with clients, have a backup. Even if you've tested it with several different people, you never know what the IT setup is going to be for a client. What combination of, they might be using a Microsoft Explorer, version 10 browser on an old Windows NT machine or something like that. So be prepared for the tool that you're using with them or that you've provided to them that it doesn't work. Have something there as a backup. I can't tell you how many times I've had to scramble quickly when a tool didn't work for a client, and I've had to resort to using Dropbox or other non-traditional, not necessarily professional tools to use those temporarily. So those are three good insights that she shared from her experience, and I think we can include the link to the site that has this chat with Kim Moore and some of the other ones I'm going to refer to, right? We can make that available to everybody?
Yes, definitely. Listeners can access those show notes from the podcast apps they're already using to listen to this episode. If they're accessing the podcast online via their computer, they can just click on this episode's info icon. That's in Google Podcasts or wherever you're finding this online. And those links should all come up in the show notes. Steve, my question then is, listening to what you've been saying, there's obviously no substitute for experience. You've got to have practical, on-the-ground experience of all the processes that you're trying to virtualize. I mean, you can't translate between two languages if you can't speak both of them pretty well. So you've got to know what's going on each side of the equation. So when we think about what a professional accountancy service generally does, the idea is that there would be people sifting through records, going through papers, trawling through archive transactions, spreadsheets, looking at everything very closely. But for the most part, everyone's sitting there in the office quite close to each other, going through the records, just to keep an eye on what's happening. So my question might seem a bit obvious, but these days, if people can't all be in the room, if they're a virtualized practice, what would this virtualized remote service actually do? And why would a client still need one?
Well, what I'd say is a virtual CPA firm in 2020 is one that can first ensure business continuity in today's environment. So what does that break down into, right? That means that it's a CPA firm that can enable their A&A staff to work effectively with a cloud-based work ecosystem with both clients and within the firm itself, right? So that has to be there. I would say that a virtual CPA firm would need to be able to enable a remote A&A workforce, right? That's not necessarily a given that they're able to have their folks in lockdown fully enabled to work and do their job effectively. So a virtual CPA firm would have that taken care of. Another would be that a virtual CPA firm is a firm that can help clients with their newly critical needs and act as even more of a trusted advisor than they have in the past, right? It's really understanding and anticipating kind of the new needs that are there or the needs that have gone from, not really a need, kind of a nice to have, to now it's become a critical need. So it's really kind of understanding what clients need right now. And being that trusted advisor that CPA firms are really the perfect type of business to be that trusted advisor, and to have firms be able to rely on, or have clients, I should say, be able to rely on the firm to be a trusted advisor on not just the normal work that they do for them, but just to be there to listen to them and answer their questions and let them kind of share what their company is going through. And then I guess another thing would be, what would a virtual CPA firm do? Well, the one example I talked about earlier is it would be a firm that can provide the most professional and secure electronic report delivery, tracking, and management possible today, both for clients and for that entire ecosystem like we talked about. When you think about important reports, important financial documents, when we go into a pandemic type situation, you want to have secure, professional delivery and exchange of important documents like that. Security is very important. And quality control, really having control, having that audit trail for where are these important documents going? Who has received them? When did they receive them? Do you have the ability to recall them in a meaningful way and track that they've been recalled? You want to have control of that information. You need to know that it's secure. So when you have those sort of basics in place, I would say that a virtual CPA firm in 2020 has also virtualized its client interaction by ensuring that the firm and clients stay connected and in sync. We talked about this a little bit earlier. And that means regardless of where anyone is working on a particular day, that they can stay in sync with the client, with all the people with which they work at the client. And this means evolving the pre-engagement meeting that typically used to be in person. That means evolving the engagement wrap-up meeting and kind of all of the back and forth and interaction in between. This is something that the client is going to expect a level of quality that they got before. So the CPA firm has to do that in a virtual way. They need to virtualize those meetings and interactions and make them efficient and professional. And then again, we talked about this a little bit earlier. They need to have their internal staff and team engagement virtualized and optimized. Clients need to know that the firm is on stable footing, that they've got this. You don't have to worry about that the firm has their staff fully enabled and that they have a plan for all these interactions and that they have the tools to execute that seamlessly. Clients need a virtualized CPA firm to ease their burdens right now. They need to be an organization, an entity, a trusted advisor that the client can rely on.
Thanks. Let's actually go back a bit and get into some of the terminology you've been using. I did say earlier that I don't come from a finance or an accounting background, but I can still recognize some of the common abbreviations you've used, things like CPA, B2B, etc. But what would you say are some other terms or jargon that we need to know about in this context? I think I can remember you used a phrase, the idea of a distributed digital virtual A&A practice. So I just actually almost broke my brain abbreviating that. So distributed digital virtual A&A, that's DDVA&A. That's quite a mouthful. So help us all out. What are the terms that you think people really need to get into their heads right now?
Well, I'll start with I dislike acronyms and jargon in general, and I'll tell you why. And that's because anyone who doesn't know its meaning is essentially left out of the conversation. So that 2 seconds that you save by using an acronym or that clever new jargon that you include actually are incredibly inefficient because you've lost members of your audience and maybe you've lost them for a day or 2 days. Because if you use an acronym or a piece of jargon in a conversation, in a meeting or an interaction early, they're going to be fixated on the fact that they don't know what that is. So they're not even going to hear what you say next. And even if they do, they're probably not going to understand the context of it. So my rule is that unless you're absolutely positive that everyone reading or listening to your words knows an acronym or term, just spell it out. Spell it out in plain English the first time. Okay. So now that I've said that, I'll step off my soapbox and we'll get on to the acronyms. So A&A, right? So A&A typically refers to audit and assurance. All firms don't use the same terminology for it, but that's typically audits and assurance, that includes financial statement reviews. Those are typically grouped together, and that acronym is A&A. At least it is most of the time, if you see that. The next one we can talk about is DAS, D-A-S. And in the accounting context, that refers to Dynamic Audit Solution. Okay, now that's a top secret project for now. But if this interview goes well, maybe I'll share a little bit more about that because I'm kind of involved in that, being part of the CPA.com assurance team. Now onto the jargon. Okay, I would say that a distributed digital virtual A&A practice is one which is rapidly responding to the changing needs of clients and its own staff and embracing technology to help with the change needed to better serve them. So that would be like a short definition for what I would say that is.
Okay, so here's the picture in my mind. When you say Instead of people turning up every now and then to your business to meet with the financial team and assisting with records and verification or submission of documents and all that type of thing, this model you're talking about, does it involve people logging into a business's computer through secure links from elsewhere? Do all meetings get replaced by video conferences? Is that what virtualization means? Perhaps it would be useful if you'd map out the journey for us and just talk about some of the key milestones on this way to becoming one of those distributed virtual practices that you're talking about.
Okay, well, we touched on these concepts earlier, but to sum up, it's really about doing these things that we talked about such that the client experience is equivalent or even improved versus what was there before while we're going through this challenging period and then beyond. And that means having ensured that the A&A business continuity in 2020 for the firm is there, having all of the resources in place and available. That means having a client interaction plan, which ensures that you and your client stay connected and in sync. The meetings and the collaboration may look different, but they all still happen. And they're all efficient, so no one's time is wasted, right? So when you're talking about using video conferencing and whatnot, yeah, absolutely. Like a video conference can be very effective, but it's got to be really efficient. You need to make it such that the client doesn't have to do too much work to have that meeting with you. So you need to really look at the user experience from the client perspective. And like I said before, make sure you have a backup plan in case the tool or the means of communication or collaboration doesn't work on the particular device that they're using. And again, having a staff and team engagement plan that accounts for the unprecedented changes that are coming and are already underway. This is a big one for 2020. So I'm going to want to dig into that one more a little bit later.
I think that's pretty clear. Every journey comes with the same kind of stuff. There are milestones and route markers, but I think at the same time, we know we have to contend with bottlenecks or obstacles as well, don't we? Part of any journey is a roadmap. And I know we've talked about why a roadmap is so important. I mean, logically, things are generally going to go better if you plan for them. But I think the one thing that most plans can't really take into account, except perhaps the most elaborate and complex ones, they can't really take the unexpected into account, can they? What's around the corner? Where are the potholes? Give us a sense of what a firm should expect to deal with on their journey to becoming a virtualized business. What are some of the wobbles they can expect to see on their roadmap?
Well, you'd have to start with season, right? So audit season and tax season. Seriously, though, despite the best intentions at the beginning of the year, innovation and going virtual initiatives can easily slide down the priorities list when things get really busy. And they just get forgotten or they get pushed into next year. From one perspective, kind of life and day-to-day work get in the way. It's just, it happens. Audit season and tax season can be crazy at a firm. And I hear it from so many firms that talk about things they had planned related to innovation and virtualization during the year. Just it's back on the list as a goal for the next year. So I'd say there are a few key areas to think about, though, to avoid this and other common roadblocks. So why don't we talk about those a little bit? So one of them is a really interesting concept that I learned about back in December and have been studying. And this is really thinking about socialized to management, the concept and practices of something like what's called upskilling in flight for innovation. Okay, and many firms are considering new skills and competencies that they need to virtualize and innovate and also deliver the services of today and tomorrow.
That is a new expression to me. I don't understand what socialized to management actually means. What? Maybe I can take a guess. Sure. Is there an art of gentle persuasion to this? So before the tech stuff can start to happen, you have to talk people around, or?
Well, I think there is. And when I say socialized to management is when you're bringing up something that's new, something that is change. It's something that the senior partner is probably not familiar with. Then kind of just directly sort of proposing it or saying, hey, we should be doing that is typically not an effective strategy. So what you first want to do is socialize it, right? You want to, I think we talk about in American politics, we talk about sending out a trial balloon, right? You find ways to have the topic be put in front of your management, the topic, the concepts, the best practices, just so they can start to hear about it and get an idea of what it is. But you're doing that before you're sort of proposing it as this is something we should do. So it's a way of creating awareness for a concept and helping them gently get smarter on it so that they kind of understand what it is.
So a bit like a process of osmosis,
yes.
A gentle exposure to light.
Yes, gently get them to learn about the concept, what it is, how it can benefit organizations like theirs, maybe who else has done it. But it's not, you're not giving them an order to learn about it. You're not saying, hey, we should do this. What you're doing is you're socializing the idea and the concept. And like I said, I like a trial balloon, or I like what you said, osmosis. And this is a kind of an effective technique. It's proven to be an effective technique to bring someone around on something where they would probably just give you a snap reaction of a hard no if you brought it up, because they're just not familiar with it. So upskilling in flight is something that is probably not a concept that every firm's management would know about, and what that concept is, it's considering what are the new skills and competencies that your firm is going to need going forward to create new services, to do things you currently do better and more efficiently. But beyond that, it's how can you put together a plan to bring those new skills in, but not take your eye off the ball and not miss out or stumble on any of the day-to-day things that you have to do anyway. Think about like a plane refueling in midair, right? You're in flight. You've still got to get from here to there, but you need to do something else too, So that's upskilling in flight. And there are some kind of proven systematic approaches to upskilling in flight to help an organization, to help a firm kind of go virtual and innovate while still tending to the important work that's in front of the firm. The person that I've heard that is the best at this concept is a woman by the name of Gail Crosley, and she's a CPA, but she has a company that specializes in helping firms do just this, and what I'll give you is a little a sample of it, and it involves three key principles, and those the three key principles of upskilling in flight are, one is the idea of transforming your time, right? How do you transform your time, which involves shifting work such that each staffer only does the type of work for which they're uniquely suited. It's shifting work around such that people are doing the work which they're passionate about and for which they're uniquely suited. Even things that they're pretty good at but don't like, it's about shifting that work to somebody else who does like that kind of work, who is better suited to it, right? So that's this concept of transforming your time, and that's for everybody. And then the second one is transform your mindset. Transforming your mindset from a calendar-driven compliance mindset, which I think a lot of our listeners would be familiar with that. Transforming it from that to one in which you develop new skills and behaviors to envision, initiate, persuade, and innovate. That's what you want people to be spending their time on, and is getting skills and behaviors to be able to do those kinds of things instead of reacting to the calendar, the calendar of what has to happen today, and where it's driving you. It's basically transforming your mindset so that you are developing new skills and behaviors to where now what you're doing is active. It's, you're envisioning the new services you're going to put out and the new ways you're going to do it. You're initiating projects. You're initiating different efforts. You're persuading people to get on board, and then ultimately you're innovating, right? So that's another thing that she gets into, and it's just it can really change the firm in a dramatic way. And then the third thing is to concurrently develop capabilities and markets, right? Firms are looking to develop new capabilities, put out new service offerings, enter new markets. That's a big ocean to be playing in. But to have a way to, while you're doing what you need to do normally, but at the same time, like looking at the development of capabilities concurrently with looking at what markets do we want to enter and focus on, and that can be done through a structured process. There is a way to do something, two things which are often parallel paths, which is not good. This development of new capabilities and then looking at markets. There are structured processes, structured ways to do those two things concurrently. So that's just a brief summary. But again, Kyle, I'll look to you to include a link to where you can see how this approach is used with a firm. And that would be something that people can socialize to their management.
Thanks, Steve. You've packed a lot in there, so I'll just see if I can repeat all of those. And I hope I got this right. You said you have to concurrently, there are three things you have to focus on.
Yes.
Develop capabilities markets, have a structured process, transform your mindsets and your time. So I guess that means you have to move from being driven by calendars to being driven by behaviors and skills. So three very key things to focus on. But you said that these are only some of the areas we should be focusing on. So what else is there? What's next?
The second way to deal with roadblocks that I think people should consider is consider dedicating specific resources and budget to innovation and or specific go digital or go virtual projects. Firms taking this approach where they've made it a budget line item, where they've tagged specific, personnel resources to these kind of projects or to innovation, they're the ones, the firms that have taken that approach have told us that it's really proved effective in achieving their innovation and virtualization type goals. And I've seen this work a number of different ways. It doesn't have to be, one particular way. I've seen it where a firm has added staff which actually have an innovation job title, director of innovation. I've also seen it be effective where the firm is saying, they're going to use an outside contractor or an outside organization to drive these virtualization or digital or, other innovation projects. The key is that the resources are dedicated to these efforts and they won't get sucked into the day-to-day A&A work when things get busy. That's what's tough about having, even your best people, assigned to work on innovation, but it's sort of their extra job when they have extra time. And part of the year they can put time into it, but inevitably what typically happens there is that when it gets busy, they do what they know. They go back to dealing with the day-to-day work. So dedicating specific resources and budget to these types of things is where we've seen a lot of success.
That's really important because we're thinking this is very much a technologically driven conversation, but people actually factor into this process in all sorts of ways, don't they? It's not only structural roadblocks or bottlenecks on that roadmap we were talking about that can prove to be obstacles. It's also people's attitudes. I mean, there's such a thing as an organizational or an institutional mindset, but the individuals that make up that organization are absolutely crucial. I mean, you were just talking about people. When you've got the right people doing the right thing, it seems to make sense, doesn't it? But sometimes, and I think we all can think of examples or times when this has happened, we will try to be part of a change process and we'll be doing that alongside people who don't feel as positive about it. So what do we do about them?
Well, passive or even blatant resistance to change by one or two partners has often been cited as why innovation projects or virtualization projects are stymied. And often it's like, that partner, they didn't say no when the project or rollout was discussed or first announced, but they found creative ways to get their team out of participating, and kind of keep things the same, for one more season or one more year. But, that's typically a rinse and repeat, and then the same thing happens the following year. It's something they don't want to do, and they will essentially stand in the way of an innovation project being successful. The best ways that we've heard to prevent this kind of roadblock, one of them is to identify the most likely naysayer partner and get them involved in the planning process for that project. Ask their advice on the project, on the idea and on the project, and then take some of their advice. Most people do typically like it when you ask their opinion. They especially like it if you ask their opinion and then you act on it. So if you do that and then they feel a bit connected to the project, then they're unlikely to be that roadblock even during the busy season. So the next would be go to the top, right? Get the managing partner involved, get the leader at the very top, get them involved in the planning, and try to make that person make him or her an active champion of your Go Virtual or innovation initiatives. Providing them a monthly or even weekly update along the way on the progress of it, and doing it such that it's designed for them to easily share it out with the firm and talk to other people about, that can work really well to motivate everyone. If the big boss is excited about it and talking about it, that typically will bring along direct reports, even if they aren't necessarily thrilled about having to do something new.
It seems pretty obvious, doesn't it, that seniority counts. I suppose the big boss is more difficult to say no to than to refuse someone further down the organizational ladder. So as long as you can get the right people on board, I suppose there'd be less chance of your more influential advocates being sidestepped or second-guessed by people further down the company hierarchy. Yeah, that makes very good sense. We'll carry on with this discussion in part 2 of this guide to virtualizing your CPA practice. That'll be coming up in a couple of weeks' time, and I think we'll pick up that discussion with more on this question, the question of people. How can we bring them, as well as all the right elements, together in the right ways, but do it online? And then how do we look at what happens when those elements are working together apart? Because, of course, they can't be physically close to each other. So we'll be talking about cyber separation and plenty more besides. We'll be doing that when Steve Menges from CPA.com returns to share more of his in-depth practical guidance to help virtualize your CPA practice. Thank you so much, Stephen, and thank you for listening to this episode of the Go Beyond Disruption podcast. You'll find this episode alongside more than 100 others at gobeyonddisruption.com. Share, subscribe, listen to our archive, and of course, if you have any comments, find a link to email us in the links to this episode. We'll be back very soon with more conversations that help you and your business to go beyond disruption. Till next time, keep safe and keep listening. Bye-bye.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Beyond Disruption, brought to you by the Association of International Certified Professional Accountants. Learn more about today's topic at AICPA-CIMA.com/disruption. This podcast is designed to provide illustrative information with respect to the subject matter covered and does not represent an official opinion or position of the Association of International Certified Professional Accountants or any of its subsidiaries or affiliates. It is provided with the understanding that the association, its affiliates, and subsidiaries are not engaged in rendering legal, accounting, or other professional services. If such advice or expert assistance is required, the services of a competent professional person should be sought. The association, its subsidiaries, and affiliates make no representations, warranties, or guarantees as to and assume no responsibility for the content or application of the material contained herein and expressly disclaim all liability for such damages arising out of the use of, reference to, or reliance on such material.